Differentiated instruction to me is when I teach a lesson and I design the lesson to meet needs of different students in my class.
I guess I would say differentiation is a way to provide opportunity for students to show us what they know, and it's a way to engage all students.
The teacher does different things during the period. So the teacher has them do a writing, and the teacher has them do, I don't know, a skit or something. And then there's also differentiation with individual needs. Like Sally does this because she's good at that, and Johnny does something else. So that's sort of differentiation.
When I design a lesson, I might consider the kinesthetic, tactile, visual, auditory learners, and I think, what can I do in my lesson where each student at one point can do something that's helpful for their learning and still be productive for the goal that I have for the entire class. So I'm not making individual lesson plans for each student, but in my head I'm thinking as I'm planning my lesson over the course of a week, am I hitting all of these different learning styles in my lesson to make sure that I'm not losing anybody along the way.
So in the lesson that I taught, the assignment page that I handed out had a place for them just to write down 2 quotes they found. And knowing that class, I knew that some students would do that very well, and some students, we would get to the end of the chapter and there would be nothing there. So having them write it on Post-it notes did 2 things. It held them a little bit more accountable, because everybody would know that you have to walk up to the board and contribute. And then it would also allow for a lot more opportunities rather than just finding 2 isolated quotes. They would have their 2 plus all the ones that their peers found as a way to help the ones who maybe didn't find the best quotes.
Yeah, I like that type of teaching because, like, sometimes it'd be hard for me to understand where she's coming, or any teacher where they're coming from when they said we have to jot down a few things. I like to express myself in that type of way.
My favorite type of lesson would have to be when a teacher makes things attract my eyes, like doing smart board things, or where you get to work with other kids and you get to use your mind.
What happens in Foursquare is I put some problems on the overhead and the students solve the problems and by themselves at their desk, and then when the timer goes off, they go up to the board, they put the 4 problems on the board, and they're supposed to compare with people around them. When they all agree, they sit down, and then when the next timer goes off, the next slide has all of the answers on it, so then we can all sit and look around the room to see if there's any discrepancies, and then we can have a conversation about any discrepancies that are up there to help with their understanding. My students who work very quickly, they will probably finish all of the questions. But if I have a student who's not working very quickly, that's fine. They might finish 1 or 2, maybe 3 problems, and that's perfectly fine. And that gives me a point where I can go and individually help the students.
She'll pull you one-on-one, sit you in the back, and if you can't get the problem right, she'll help you resolve the problem.
And then the students who are already getting it, they're actively working and practicing, because in math, we want the students to be mathematically fluent, meaning they can solve the problems pretty readily without not having to think much about it, just fluently solve them.
You get to involve with other students and get to understand what they do to help them with math.
And so the people that go up to the boards, when you go up there in a group, everybody needs to help each other. If you don't get the right answer, everybody got to resolve the problem and see where that person messed up, and it's to help that person.
I thought, I'm going to do something with hats on Islam to I think they call it a hook. I thought, rather than just yammering on about history and this and that, I'll do something with hats. So anyway, I put the hat on backwards, and like the college kids. I don't understand why they do that, but it worked, because I told them, the kids, that people in Muslim countries wear hats like that, but they also wear all the other hats. I hope it all went okay.
We were just finishing doing something, and then all of a sudden he puts on this backwards baseball cap, and his hair was all messed up. And then he starts asking us what would be our first impressions if we saw someone like that. So we all went around and we gave our impressions, and he put on another hat, and it was a headband and it had the almost kind of blanket thing coming down. Then he just kept switching and asking us our first impressions. And then in the end, really all these things would have to relate to the Muslim religion. It was kind of almost a real world lesson as well, not just a history lesson. It was really interesting.
We were just trying to show how different cultures and different people can vary, like variations can change like just how you present yourself to others. And so just how you present yourself can change what people think of you and where you're from.
I find that there's challenges in pretty much anything we do in education, but when you're differentiating instruction, one of the challenges is making sure that the students stay on task, because oftentimes there are times when I need to be with a certain set of students and I'm not really focused on another set, and I have to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to. But I found out what can really help with that is if I've set it up in advance. So just like anything, if we all know what we're expected to do, we can generally rise to the occasion. And so I'll teach the students, this is how you do this, this is how you do this, this is what's expected here. And I make sure that they understand the expectations of what we're doing and what their behavioral expectations are, as well as the math expectations I have for them.
You know those students that even if it is testing situation, everyone's in their seat, there's that kid that's going to be out of his desk or, talking or something. And so then really your brain starts thinking, what's going to happen if I group, or if we move the desks around, or what is going to happen if I tell them to get up and move around? And it is a scary thing. I don't want to be completely out of control. And sometimes you try stuff and it doesn't work. And sometimes the students that you think they are not going to handle this well, handle it really well, because they have that opportunity. Like, you're supposed to stand up and walk around the room, and they get the chance to do that.
Sometimes I'm not going to say that I'm not a class clown or I don't like to, I don't joke around. It's like I get the feeling I want to talk to somebody, in class. I just sit there, and when I get done with my work, I just want to look over and start a conversation about us getting up on the board, and we have to talk and interact with other people. It's a better way for me to do it that way.
You got to do something like the Carolingian Renaissance in history. And it's not like kids are saying, oh my God, great, we get to do the Carolingian Renaissance today. That's just, no, they're not, they generally don't want to learn about something like that. So you have to find some way. It's kind of like getting them to swallow a bowling ball. You have to be creative about this.
I think it's a lot better when teachers, like I said, relate things more to the real world, and it's easier to remember that way. It's easier to kind of sometimes base lessons off of real life, and you remember them a lot easier. I hate it when teachers will sit there and, like I said, go on and on about, oh, this happened, and then this happened, and...
If you do it, you will understand it better because you're actually doing it than just hearing it. If you're hearing it, you're hearing it, but you're not getting it. Hands-on is when you're actually doing it, so if you do it, you can memorize the steps and everything.
And I think, I try to put myself in the students' positions too, that, if it's the same old, it's hard to get excited about it, and it's hard for me as a teacher to get excited about it. So I try to think of assignments too that are fun to grade and fun to watch the students get excited about.
There's oftentimes best practices in teaching, and when I think about the best practices and I try to differentiate, oftentimes there's a big overlap between what I know is good for students and how I can help them as I'm trying to differentiate my classroom.